Okay, so before I actually go into the problems that you asked me to do, Vanessa, what I'm going to do is give you a little background information so that you can understand where factoring comes from. So what I'm going to do is show you how to multiply a binomial using the FOIL method first. So I'm assuming that you've already done this. If you haven't, then just let me know. So what you do is you multiply the first terms, so that means the first term in each binomial, which is 3x and 2x, so that's what the f part is for, that's for first term. So when you multiply these two terms together, it's 3x times 6x, 3x times 2x, which is 6x squared. Okay, so that's the first terms. Then the O represents the outer terms, which would be 3x and 5. Okay, so those are the outer terms. So we're going to multiply these two together, which is 3x and negative 5. So that would be negative 15x. And trust me, there's a reason why we're doing this. So even if you already know how to do this, just bear with me for a second, and I will show you the purpose of doing this. Alright, so the next one is you gotta multiply the inner terms. That's what the I stands for. The inner terms are these terms right here, inside, right? So these are the two inner terms. So positive 1 times 2x is positive 2x. Alright, and then it says the last terms. So the last terms means the last terms in the binomial. So it would be this term, 1 and negative 5. So 1 times negative 5 is negative 5, clearly. Alright, and then I'm sure you learned about combining like terms. Well, these two terms right here are like terms because they both have x. So what I'm going to do is rewrite this. So we have 6x squared. And then when we combine these, hopefully you know that that's minus 13x, negative 13x, because you have negative 15 and positive 2, so you got to take basically 2 away from that. Hopefully you already know how to do that part, but if you don't, you can let me know and I can show you how to do that on a number line. And then minus 5. Okay, so this right here is what we call a quadratic. Okay, and that's what you guys are looking at right now. So when we go from here to there, that's called multiplying a binomial. That's what we just did. So that's multiplying. When we go from here to there, that's called factoring. So what you're doing is factoring the the trinomial, into two binomials. So this is a binomial. Bi meaning two, right? Binomial. I'm retarded. Binomial, A-L. So you have this binomial right here, two terms, and you have this binomial right here. So when you factor, you're factoring into two binomials. When you multiply out two binomials, you get a trinomial. That's 3 terms. Just like tricycle has 3 wheels, a trinomial has 3 terms. A bicycle has 2 wheels, so that means a binomial has 2 terms. Okay, so now what we have to do is take your problems, that means your problems are trinomials, and what we have to do is factor them into 2 binomials. So the main thing that we have to look at is, where do the terms come from? Where does this term come from? How do we get that term? We get that term when we multiply 3x times 2x. But now what I'm going to do is pause and erase all of this because it looks really garbagey, just so that you can get a better understanding. So I'm going to pause for a second, erase this, and then we'll come back to it in a more clean way. So hold on. Alright, well you really didn't feel that pause, but I paused and cleaned up the screen a little bit because this was really messy. Okay, so remember, we're going from there to there. So we're factoring. Okay, so remember that's called factoring. And the other way is called multiplying out a binomial. Two binomials. So what we need to look at when we factor is we need to look at where our terms come from. So where does this term come from? 6x squared. Well, it comes from multiplying this term, first term, by that term. Okay, so we need to remember that. So this first term is always achieved or gotten by multiplying the first two terms in the binomial. So these are considered the first terms. Okay? Remember in the FOIL, you have the FOIL method, so this is the first terms. That gets you the first term in the trinomial. Now, how do you get this term right here? This is the last term, so clearly you would multiply what we call the last terms. 1 times negative 5. So this is the last terms. Okay, so the first term is achieved by multiplying the first two terms up here, and the last term is achieved by multiplying the last terms in the binomial. Okay, so they're called the first two terms because they're listed first in the binomial. So the 3x is before the 1. The 2x is before the negative 5. So that's why it's called the first term. And these are called the last terms in the binomial. Okay, so getting the first term and the last term is the easiest part of factoring. The simplest part of factoring that you can ever do in your life. You're just picking numbers that multiply to this term, and then here you are picking numbers that multiply to get to this term. The hardest term to get in any factoring situation is this middle term right here. That's the hardest term to get. Now, how did we get that term? So that's what we need to think about. So how did we get this term? Well, we have to look back at our previous stuff. So how did we get this term? And how did we get this term? And then we use these two terms and combine them together to get this term. That's why it's so difficult to get this term, because you have to combine these two terms together to get that term. So you need to know what these two terms are in order to get the correct term in the middle. So that's where the difficulty comes in. So how do we get these inner terms? We multiply the inners with the outers. So these are the inners, right? And these are the outer terms. So when we multiplied the inners and the outers, when we multiplied it, we had 3x, that's what this blue line is for, multiplied by negative 5. So that gave us this, the negative 15x. When we multiply the inners, it gave us the second term. Okay? And then we combine those together to get this middle term right here. So that's the difficulty. So that's what you have to remember when you're factoring. So when I talk to you about factoring, I'm going to say inner, outer terms, right? First terms, last terms. So I want to make sure you understood the definition of everything and how everything works. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start on your problems. The issue now is that YouTube only allows me to do 10-minute videos, so I need to stop now and start another video. So I'll be back and starting a new video with the problems that you gave me. Alright, hold on.